exciting action from the Drak 250 off-road race in KwaZulu-Natal, proudly brought to you by Motique Toyota Kokstad. The Drakensberg Mountains provide for some of the most spectacular and beautiful scenery in South Africa. In winter, the Drakensberg also provide for some of the coldest locations in South Africa. But a little nip in the air is no deterrent for off-road races, and the recent Motique Toyota Drak 250 drawing an entry of more than 30 cars for round 4 of the KwaZulu-Natal Regional Championship.
Typical Underberg morning, about a -5 or 6 again. So it's frozen fingers before we've even started, so it's going to be great fun, this first prologue. Yeah.
These are your normal conditions for the event?
Pretty much, yeah. I'd say so, yeah. Just hopefully this mist clears in the valley, because the thick mist and the dust combined and no wind is going to be great fun at the first 15 Ks.
Off-road racing at regional and national level is a family-oriented sport, and the chilly conditions did nothing to dampen the enthusiasm of competitors and their families.
Yeah, I think everybody's trying to make it more of a family-orientated thing, and as you can see, quite a few people do turn up with their families and that type of thing. Like all the little kids love the cars and the noise and that type of thing. So yeah, it's a good outing for everyone.
Early morning starts may not be everyone's cup of tea, but the leading KwaZulu-Natal driver Glenn Gibson was looking forward to a good race.
Boys are going to go hammer and tongs from the word go. Yeah, we've got at least eight challenges for the race today, and it's going to be one to, yeah, I think it's going to be fierce racing all day.
A win on the Atlas Copco 400 national event in Dundee in May took Leon Botma to the top of the Class B Drivers' Championship in the KwaZulu-Natal and National Championship Series.
Class B in the ring champion is actually a very open class. It's not the most difficult, I think, and it's not as competitive as the Class A, but it's open, so the people fall out easy. They break the cars in a hurry.
Motorsport is no longer an exclusively male pastime, with roses among the thorns growing in numbers in all categories of racing. Leon Botma's daughter Amanda takes on her father and other Class B competitors single-handed in a quaintly named missile.
It goes under the name of a missile. Comes out of the engineering top tech factory, if I can say it like that. And I've got a 2-litre Mazda motor, Go-Tech computer, pretty normal stuff, very standard single-seater. It's not too complex. I think I've got the ability to change a tyre if required. And I think as a woman alone out there, it's a disadvantage, more when your car breaks. I mean, it takes me probably 40 minutes to change a back tyre. From a time point, so it's a big disadvantage. If you're wrong slot or you get lost, you're on your own out there. I don't have a GPS in my car. So I think it's a disadvantage from a single-seater point, but it's still good, quiet, solitude fun.
The KwaZulu-Natal Regional Championship copies the ABSA National Series, with events starting with a prologue, sponsored by Donaldson Filtration Equipment and Vehicle Protection Services, to determine start positions for the race.
As a Donaldson dealer, being my business, Vehicle Protection Services in Pietermaritzburg, we looked at putting something back into the sport, and having been involved with NRMC for the last 25 years, we approached my suppliers, being Donaldson, and we then decided to put the deal together similar to what we've done at the Nationals.
As is the case with national events, the start order for the prologue is based on a seeding list. The draw for the Drak 250 saw Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann start ahead of Glenn Gibson and Gary Campbell, Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher, and Reg Sutton and Warren Benneker, with the leading cars all running in Class A. Ahead of crews was a short 20-kilometre burst that would provide them with an idea of what lay ahead on a 70-kilometre route in the Underberg and Himville areas. During the race, competitors would tackle the 70-kilometre route 3 times, with a compulsory 15-minute stop at the designated service point at race headquarters in the Underberg Country Club after the second lap. As was to be expected over a distance of only 20 kilometres, the prologue turned into a close-fought affair with Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher setting the fastest time overall in a Class A. The Bat had picked up a little bunting on the way, with Barnes and Usher finishing just 3 seconds ahead of the Porter of Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell. Gibson and Campbell are regular ABSA National Championship competitors and finished on the podium in the Atlas Copco 400. Another 32 seconds in arrears were third-placed Reg Sutton and Warren Benneker in a Zarko, with Sutton another driver with plenty of national championship experience. Another crew with ABSA National Championship experience provided for some early drama. Don Thompson and Wayne Foster were candidates for overall honours, but hit a rock which launched the Zarko into a series of rolls that put paid to their race. Former South African rally champion Tony Ball was seeded ahead of the Staffex bomber of John Thompson and Ian Crouch, but problems along the way saw the Durban garage owner finish around 6 minutes behind the Class B leaders. The Staffex car has seen plenty of duty on national and regional events, and although Thompson and Crouch had a clean run, they were only 18 seconds ahead of James Watson in Class B. There was to be no clean run for Daniel Brooks and Thomas Lawson, with their progress halted by a puncture that was to drop them way down the pecking order. Brooks and Lawson were busy changing the wheel when James Watson went steaming past in the Mighty Mag single-seater on his way to second in Class B. With Don Thompson and Wayne Foster out of action, Mark Sorrell and Kevin Turon took control of Class B in the BP Drak. The pair were well clear of Glenn Gibson and Andrew Hall and were being chased by Graham Peterson, who was third in Class B in the single-seater Dragonfly. The likes of brothers Bix and Richard Carolyn, Marius Perrine and Rob Walk have all won the Toyota Desert Race in single-seaters, but these days the cars are to be found almost exclusively in regional competition. The experienced Rob Spencer and Ralph Francis were going along steadily in a Zarko, with some good battles developing in Class B. There were only 6 seconds between Spencer and Francis and former South African champion Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith in a JRE, with the top 5 in Class B covered by less than 2 minutes. In motor racing, there's a fine line between triumph and tragedy, and the wreck of the Thompson-Foster Zarko on the side of the road was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes can change. The Mighty Mag of Rob Hanbury was at the tail of a small train of Class B cars, with a nicely turned out single-seater running 37 seconds behind Taylor and Keith. A little further back in the field, the Vehicle Protection Services Bat of Gavin and Darren Gray was running 4th in Class A. The father and son combination had not run into problems in one of the early spec bats and were going along steadily enough. The Greys had a half a minute in hand over Class B runners Brian Carlitz and Norman Stain, who were nearly 3 minutes behind the class leaders and trying to make up time. The Zarko Jr. of Terry Bailey and Jennifer Gregson was under pressure from the Sandmaster in the hands of Ian McLean and Luke van Dort. McLean and van Dort would soon pass the Zarko, which would also be caught and overtaken by Amanda Botma in the Missile. Back at race headquarters, it was time for prologue post-mortems, while service crews readied their chargers for the start of the race. Among the prologue casualties were Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann, who were among the pre-race favourites in the LT Earth Movers Bat.
No, we had a bit of bad luck. The V-belt jumped off and the spring broke off on the accelerator cable. So we had a flat-out throttle and overheating car, so we stopped. And then we just brought it back to the pits now, and we'd rather just take the penalty, and then we'll see what happens today. But I think we've got a lot of work to do today.
Prologue winner Arthur Barnes was happy with the result of his morning's work, but with a lead of just 3 seconds over Glenn Gibson and Gary Campbell, the pressure was on.
Yeah, it went very well. They were very happy with the car. Had no issues with the car. She ran well. It's tough out there. The pressure was on us. We didn't expect to get such a good result. We had a clean run, and I think pressure's definitely going to be on us for the main race.
Reg Sutton and Warren Benneker were only 35 seconds behind the prologue leaders, but it could have been much better. They lost precious time when a little mistake saw them stuck in a ditch.
Not as good as we'd like. We overshot a corner and fell in a ditch and took us 3 or 4 minutes to get out, or maybe 3 minutes to get out. But you can't afford that in a prologue.
A good rapport and teamwork between driver and co-driver is a prerequisite for success in off-road racing. Her off-road debut was an awesome experience for rookie co-driver Jennifer Gregson, who explained her role in the car alongside driver Terry Bailey.
It was awesome. Definitely want to carry on. Definitely will do it again.
The role of the navigator in a car like this, now you've done it, now tell us what's the role of the navigator?
To basically preempt the course, explain what's about to happen before it happens, and try and get it right. I kept going wrong a bit, but we got back, so couldn't have been that bad. But yeah, no, just to basically go say what's coming up, when it's coming up, when to slow down, when you can go faster.
The Motique Toyota Drak 250 is one of the major events of the year in the Underberg-Himville area. Apart from bringing top-class motor racing to the area, the event is a community project and also provides the region with a major financial boost.
It is. It's one of the major events that we put on annually. It's a community event where everyone gets involved, and I think a lot of businesses, B's&B's and the country club benefit from the event being put on in the district here.
There's a long history behind off-road racing in the Drakensberg region, and in days gone by, the Drakensberg 400 enjoyed national championship status. Veteran KwaZulu-Natal racer Rob Gibson reminisces.
Well, it used to always be the Drak 400, and we used to run from Drakensberg Gardens Hotel. And it was a national, 400 or 500 k's long. We used to start at 6 in the morning. It was like dark when you started. And on many occasions it was full of snow. There was snow all over. And but exciting. And then we lost it as a national. And there was, but the club still continued, but not racing. We never raced here then. And for a number of years we didn't race. But now we've come back for the last 9 years. We've been back to this spot. But it's a regional now.
The League of the World Cup Champions. The special one. And a match that brings a country to a standstill. A league with the European champions, the World Player of the Year, and the planet's most expensive footballer. La Liga. A league in a league of its own. Live on Supersport, your World of Champions. Proudly sponsored by MTN.
Just what secrets?
And I don't want you to regret anything.
It's gonna be quite a party.
Do this family hold?
I have a terrible feeling.
I don't know how to help her.
And figure it out. I need to tell you something.
My father's not actually my father.
Sarah! I had a choice back then.
Just close her eyes and jump.
Brothers and Sisters, Mondays on Mnet and Mnet HD.
Brothers and Sisters is sponsored by Absa Investments.
The KwaZulu-Natal Regional Championship is unique in South African off-road racing in that it caters for an entry-level category known as the cricket class. The category is a budget class with race frames imported from China. The frames are modified for South African use, with the cars powered by motorcycle engines up to 400 cc's, and former South African off-road champion Neil Woolridge is a staunch supporter.
Yeah, you know, this is where it all starts, at the regional grassroots, you know. The cricket class is the smallest and the real entry level of off-road racing. I'd say almost equivalent to a similar price to a motorcycle, and that's where the guys have got to start, you know. So at national level it's very difficult to get in, but in regional level this is where it all starts. The guys get into cricket, maybe go up a step into maybe a class E or something like that, and then progress to the nationals. So both my sons are coming through the cricket class. Lance has already progressed into the nationals in the SP class, but this is Gareth's second year in the crickets. Last year he won the Natal Championship, and this year he's doing quite well again, so looking forward to it.
The cricket class competitors also compete for grid positions on the prologue, with George De Jager setting the pace. De Jager was just 13 seconds ahead of Pietermaritzburg teenager Gareth Woolridge, who was looking for his second victory in a row after a convincing win at the Atlas Copco 400. There was a gap of 45 seconds between Gareth Woolridge and third-placed Warren Confey, who went into the event lying 7th in the championship. Confey was only 4 seconds ahead of Andrew Scott, with the pair around a minute ahead of Dave Confey, who was lying third in the championship behind Roger Curran and young Woolridge. Curran had to be content with sixths on the prologue. Cricket class drivers also had problems here and there, with Dave Confey delayed by a misfire and a puncture that cost him a place.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Had a bit of problems when I picked a puncture just the other side of the river crossing. But other than that, a bit of marker problems where there was no clear marker. Then I got overtaken by Gareth. But up until then, going beautiful.
It's never too young to start, and this youngster could soon be emulating teenager Gareth Woolridge, who completely dominated the cricket class race. The Crickets completed 2 laps of the course, with Woolridge soon out front and gradually pulling away from Warren Confey in second place. Confey was thoroughly enjoying himself, but could not match Woolridge for pace. After a disappointing prologue, Mark Smith recovered well to finish a solid third. Smith was running ahead of prologue winner George de Jager, who was a late casualty, with a tough route taking its toll on the Crickets. With elder brother Lance, who now competes at national level, there to congratulate him, Gareth Woolridge crossed the finish line with a whopping 21 minutes in hand over Warren Confey. By any standards, it was a comprehensive victory.
He started 13 seconds behind the next car, and I followed in his dust for about 10 Ks, screaming him and staying behind him as close as I could. And I battled a bit with the dust. Then he moved over on the one corner, and from there I stayed in the front. No problems and clean run.
There was a long wait for Warren Confey to cross the finish line, with another big gap to Mark Smith, who was another 18 minutes in arrears. A second win in a row took Gareth Woolridge to the top of the championship. After a short break following the morning prologue, the race proper got underway, with Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher first away, with a 3-second gap to Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell. As with the ABSA National Series, regional championship events are run to real time. This means cars set off as per their prologue times, with the old system of 2 or 3 minute dust gaps a thing of the past. Real-time racing means there's some close racing from the word go, and with 3 seconds between the first 2 cars, spectators were provided with early action. The Zarko of Reg Sutton and Warren Benniker started a half a minute behind Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell, and the pair were given an early wake-up call. A little overshoot almost led to a confrontation with a wooden fence, and cost Sutton and Benniker a couple of seconds almost before they'd started. At the front of the field, Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher were quickly into their stride in the bat. The pair looked in no mood to take prisoners, and an early hold on the race was consolidated when Glenn Gibson and Gary Campbell ran into early problems. That gave Barnes and Usher a comfortable early lead of 1 minute and 43 seconds over Reg Sutton and Warren Benniker. After their early laps, the Zarko crew had started to settle into a rhythm, but would have to up their pace if they were to whittle away at the deficit between themselves and the race leaders. The early woes for Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell lifted the Vehicle Protection Services bat of Gavin and Darren Gray into third in Class A, where they trailed Anthony Barnes and Anthony Usher by a sizable 11 minutes and 35 seconds. There were also early problems for Class B prologue winners John Thompson and Ian Crouch, and James Watson now headed the class in the Mighty Mag. Early movers in Class B were Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith in the JRE. They had made up places and were now chasing Graham Peterson in the Dragonfly. The danger of having to both drive and navigate in a single-seater was amply illustrated when Peterson zipped off to the left on the wrong route. Peterson zigged when he should have zagged, and that lifted Taylor and Keith into second in Class B, and 16 seconds behind James Watson. His little wrong slot, as it's known in the trade, dropped Peterson to over 2 minutes behind Watson. Also on the move were Lance Trethui and Carl Wichman in the LT Earth Movers bat. After their prologue woes, Truthui, who comes from an off-road background, and Wichmann started from the back of the grid, and they were scything their way through the field in impressive fashion. Behind the Class A pair, Class B crew, Rob Spencer and Ralph Francis, were going along steadily in the Zarco, but were over 7 minutes behind leader James Watson. Behind the Zarco, the unfortunate John Thompson and Ian Crouch were trying to make up lost ground after their early woes, but lost another place on the road when they were passed by Class P leaders Mark Serrao and Kevin Turon. The logo Wild Thing is emblazoned across the BP Drak of Mark Serrao and Kevin Turon, but there was nothing wild about the approach they were taking to the race. There were no heroics from the pair, with John Thompson and Ian Crouch the buffer between Serrao and Turon, and the Gibson racing bat of Glenn Gibson and Andrew Hall, which was running in a strong second place in Class P. It was tough going towards the back of the field. The pretty little Mighty Mag, driven by Rob Hanbury, was still sounding sweet and full of running, but it slipped to over 9.5 minutes behind Class B leader James Watson. Hanbury was being chased down by the bat of Leon Bortma and Quinton Brand, who'd also started from the back of the field after trouble on the prologue. Hot on the heels were Class A pair Dave and Jane Gurney in another bat, and they'd also picked up a place or two during the course of the morning. A gear selection problem meant a slight delay in progress for Stephen Murrell and Dylan Hopewell, but they were soon in trouble again in the aging raceco. A brave attempt at a Mexican wave by some local kids greeted Amanda Bortma, who was going well in the strange-looking missile. The car may look a little out of the ordinary, but it's effective, and Amanda has so far had a clear run. Behind the missile, veteran driver Tony Ball, another back-of-the-grid starter, showed he'd lost none of his rally driving skills. Ball was later to retire, but had moved ahead of Brian Carlitz and Norman Stain. Carlitz and Stain were now nearly an hour behind Class B frontrunner James Watson, with the outdated suspension on the Tiger wheel car working overtime. There were wheel problems for Daniel Brooks and Thomas Lawson on the prologue, and more of the same during the race. It was a completely different story at the front of the field, and early into the second loop of the race, it was still all systems go for race leaders Arthur Barnes and Andrew Usher. The bat had not missed a beat, and Barnes and Usher were steadily putting time and distance between themselves and those doing the chasing. At the front of those doing the chasing were Reg Sutton and Warren Benniker in the Zarco. While they were also going well, there were alarm bells for Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith, who'd moved into the Class B lead.
It's fine. We've got a breakage here.
Taylor suspected something had broken at the rear of the JRE, and while he made a quick inspection, Lance Truthui and Carl Wichmann went past. So too did James Watson to regain the Class B lead, with Taylor deciding to press on regardless. The steady Graham Peterson was making good progress in the Dragonfly, and the delay saw him closing the gap on Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith. Peterson was still running ahead of Class B prologue winners John Thompson and Ian Crouch, who'd picked up a spot. They went past the Zarco of Rob Spencer and Ralph Francis on the run in the compulsory stop at the end of Loop 2, where the bat of race leaders Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher had lost a little time.
We're wrong started now in the second loop, so we had a nice lead on Reg, but he's obviously closed the gap now. So we just got to keep it tidy now on the third loop and try and stay in front of him, and hopefully everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, so far so good. We can't catch Arthur. He's a bit quicker than us. So I think we do, and it's so dusty, so we would never get past it. We're going to just try and keep it where we are and get it to the end.
We've got a fuel pressure problem, so the car keeps cutting out, so it's no use carrying on.
We're going all right, eh? I think we're leading B at the moment. There's a second one coming in now.
Yeah, we were leading until about 2 Ks back. There's some funny noise going on there, so we got out to have a little bit of a look, but I can't see it. So problem is the dust's hectic to try and pass him again now. It's going to be a bit tricky. He let us through last lap, but I don't think he's going to let us through easy now. We'll go and we'll see.
we did some work on the front end, and it's a little bit hard over the choppy stuff, but otherwise it's going nicely. We've got 8 minutes to Reg Sutton, I think, so it's going to be a little bit of a tall task to do in 70 k's, but we're going to try. They could have a puncture, anything can happen, so it's not over until the fat lady sings.
And the fat lady was warming up her tonsils backstage as Arthur Barnes and Anthony Usher picked up on the final loop where they'd left off after the first 2 laps. With a comfortable lead over Reg Sutton and Warren Benniker, all they had to do was avoid silly mistakes. For their part, Sutton and Benniker looked to have settled for a safe second place, but they also had to avoid silly mistakes to make sure they did not gift second place to Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann, who was still on a charge in the LT Earthworks bat. Whatever it was that set alarm bells ringing for Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith was a false alarm. The pair quickly took the JRE back into the Class B lead, and they were to eventually finish around 4 minutes ahead of James Watson, who put up a brave fight in the impressive Mighty Mag. For his part, Watson was 10 minutes clear of the Zarco of Rob Spencer and Ralph Francis, who reaped the rewards of a steady pace throughout the race. Spectators along the route had been well entertained with another gritty effort coming from Graham Peterson, who took 4th overall in the Dragonfly single-seater. That made it 2 single-seaters in the top 5, with John Thompson and Ian Crouch coming in behind Peterson after a good prologue turned into a troubled race. Perseverance also paid off for Dave and Jane Gurney and Daniel Brooks and Thomas Lawson, with the 2 crews finishing 4th and 5th respectively in Class A. The Gurneys were also steadiness personified, and while at one stage it looked as though Brooks and Lawson would run out of wheels, theirs was another brave effort. Back at race headquarters, Arthur Barnes and Warren Benniker put the finishing touches to an impressive performance.
Mistakes, and just kept it tidy. We were rating. Our pit crew was advising us what the gap was, and we backed off the pace and looked after the car and just made sure it came to the end. Second place.
The margin of victory was a clear-cut 5 minutes, with Lance Trethewey and Carl Wichmann a fighting 3rd. Another impressive performance saw Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith win Class B ahead of James Watson. The next event in the ABSA Off-Road Championship is the Sun City 400 at Sun City on July 29 and 30. Tight championship positions set the scene for plenty of drama from one of the toughest races of the season. The Sun City 400 on July 29 and 30. See you there. The Drak 250 off-road race in KwaZulu-Natal was proudly brought to you by Motique Toyota Kokstad.